Hello, this video is for BTEC Sport and Exercise Science, and it's an overview video of Unit 1 Physiology of Sport and Exercise. So, what is physiology? Hopefully at this stage you should have a good understanding of anatomy. One of the first units you'll have studied was Unit 2 Functional Anatomy. And anatomy is very much the body system structure. So how all of our body systems are built. So you'll have learned about bones and joints, types of muscle fibre, the heart structure, the lung, respiratory system structure, and essentially how these body systems are built. What physiology does is slightly different. It looks at how these systems work or how they function. And obviously this is in relation to exercise, because this is essentially exercise physiology. So it looks at how our body systems, those same body systems plus a few extras, respond when we exercise and how they adapt when we do longer term training, or how they respond in different exercise environments. So physiology is how do our body systems work together to enable us to exercise and to get better at exercising. Now, the things that we will cover within this unit are come under 4 learning aims. Learning aim A is in the moment when we are exercising during an exercise session, that could be an endurance session, that could be a resistance or strength training session. How do our body systems respond? What do they do for us? How do they work for us to enable us to do that exercise session? So that is like the short term, the immediate responses to exercise of all of these body systems. We also look at learning aim B, which is during exercise, what sorts of things cause us to fatigue? What sorts of things in different body systems or contexts cause us to fatigue? And when we've finished exercising, what needs to happen to get our body systems to go back to normal? So how do we recover from exercise? Learning aim C is a little bit different, and it's not in the moment, it's more a longer term adaptation or change that might happen with these systems. So if we did, for example, a 6-week or an 8-week training program, a resistance training or a continuous exercise endurance training program, how would those body systems change or adapt to get better at allowing us to do exercise in that way? So immediate or short-term responses. Why do we get tired? How do we recover from exercise? Longer term changes that enable our body systems to become better. And then this learning aim D is a little bit different. It is a combination of those, actually, all 3. If we were to try to exercise in different environmental conditions, for example, if we exercised in high altitude conditions or really, really hot conditions or really, really cold conditions, how do our systems respond? Do they positively, do those conditions negatively impact on us? And can we get used to those conditions? Can our body systems adapt? If I trained in high altitude conditions regularly, do my body systems change and get better at coping with those challenges? So that's the content of the physiology unit. Now, this unit is assessed by an external exam. It is one of the largest size units in the whole course, and certainly with us, you will experience several mocks leading up to your full exam paper. You will probably have a small, medium, and a full paper, so that you build up this experience of understanding how to approach the exam questions, how to get the timing right. And then the final exam is obviously a written exam. It's an hour and a half unless you have extra time. It's worth 70 marks, and you'll sit it in the January of your 2nd year. Now, the way they structure the actual exam paper is there are 4 questions. So question 1, 2, 3, 4. Question 1 will have several parts. So there'll be 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, maybe more. And those are short answer questions. The final question in question 1, or the final part of question 1, will always be an 8 marker. The final part of question 2 will always be an 8 marker. So each of those 4 scenario questions. So they'll give you a person, an athlete, and a context for those questions. And all of the little questions in that large question will be about that person. And always the last part of those questions will be 8 markers. So these last 2 bits of information give you an approximation of, this was 1 year, the mark boundaries. So if you got 45 out of 70 in this particular year, you got a distinction grade in that unit. 32 to get a merit, 20 to get a pass, 10 to get a near pass. Below that, and you have been ungraded. These are roughly the same. They do fluctuate a little bit. But what matters more than the marks you get in your actual paper is the points you get. So remember, this is 120 guiding learning hours, the largest exam unit. If you get distinction, you get 32 points. If, let's say, you got just below 45 out of 70, maybe you got 44, you wouldn't have the label of a distinction, but you would get, basically, it's a very high merit. What that means is you might get 31 points, which actually is not that different. It's not a big issue for you in terms of your overall grade in your whole course. So marks obviously do matter. Some students can get hung up on whether they got the label of a distinction or a merit, but actually what matters is the points that you get. So if you can get a high merit, it will almost be as good as a distinction. You could get 70 out of 70 and you would still only get 32. So it just matters how high up that sort of sliding scale of merit to distinction or pass to merit that you get, which determines what points you get. So let's have a look at one of these scenario questions. Remember, there's one large question, which is broken down to smaller questions plus an 8 marker. So this one is about Ed, who's a cricketer. So 1A is about synovial fluid, and it's worth 2 marks. There's a part B, which is about bone remodeling, it's worth 4 marks. This jumps to talking about Ed's breathing rate, so it's a different topic altogether, different system, for 2 marks. And then it goes to part D, which is an 8 marker. So every question will finish with an 8 marker. But you can see they're all orientated around Ed, the cricketer. So I guess an important point to make is, actually the 8 marker was on muscle fibers, because what it shows is these parts are not necessarily on the same body system or the same topic. It could be on any topic in the spec. So let's have a quick look at how to approach the short answer questions. Interpreting the question and understanding what it wants from you is really key. You can write a brilliant answer to the wrong question and get no marks. So if obviously it's talking about body in this context, use that name in your answer. It just makes you connect to the question rather than giving a purely theoretical answer. So things to look out for. What's the command verb? Does it say analyze, describe, explain, state? This one says explain. Okay, so that's the verb. They want you to give an explanation of something. And there's the explain. How many are there any number of things that it wants you to talk about, and how does that relate to the marks available? So here it says explain 2. So it wants you to give reference or explanation of 2 aspects of something. And the question is worth 4, so it kind of makes sense to have 2 marks for each of those 2 explanations. What is it? And give an explanatory fact about it. Clues for the learning aim. Does it talk about responses or adaptations, or if it says playing regularly, or does it say cause fatigue in the question blurb? That can give you a clue as to what it wants. So it's about body pump classes improving strength. So maybe that would be an adaptation. How do you get stronger? How do these body pump classes help her skeletal system adapt to get stronger? It may well refer to a topic within a specific body system. Obviously, this is referring to the skeletal system. And it may refer to a specific type of exercise or training. And in this case, it's talking about body pump class, resistance training, lifting weights, which is what you do in a body pump class. So it does lead you to the answer. So This was the question. This was the examination and mark scheme. Okay, and the mark scheme actually needed you to use this language. And without this language, you wouldn't have got your marks. So it's really important when you're practicing or revising to look at the mark schemes, because it gives you clues as to the sort of things that the examiners need or want you to include in specific topics. But you can see also that they give you different options. So there's not one answer which is just correct. You could earn your 2 marks by addressing several of these points and earning your marks in different ways. Here's just an example. You can pause the video and have a little look at an answer. I've written it in prose that might, show you how to construct an answer to a short answer question. I've made a point, I've explained it. That's my 2 marks, and I've linked it to the question. And obviously this was a question on skeletal system adaptations, and when I teach this, this is the acronym that this would be to do with. Now, let's look at quickly an 8-marker question. So 8 markers are not marked, you've made a correct fact, get a mark. You've made another correct fact, get a second mark. It's not like that. It's a bit like question 11 and 12 in your Unit 2 Functional Anatomy exam. It's what we call levels marking. So your examiner will read your whole answer. They will then go, which sort of description does it fit best, i.e. which level is this answer at? Do you have some correct facts, but it's a bit erratic? Do you have mostly accurate, some accuracy and demonstrate some links and analysis? Or do you mostly give correct information? Do you break your points down and make sense of them and build them up in a really logical, interrelated way? And that will determine which level you get, and therefore within that level what mark you might get. So they'll decide the level first and then give you a grade or a mark within that level. So they could say, right, I think this is a level 2 answer. I think it's a top end level 2. I'm going to give it a 6. So again, here's a way of interpreting what this 8-marker wants from you, the sorts of things. Obviously, it's going to be an 8-marker, so we know we've got to pick several points and explain and analyse them. It gives you contextual information, they all do, so it tells you that she's a marathon runner, and obviously that's an endurance event. Gives you, again, a sense of the sorts of things that it might link to in the specification. There's a command verb or command word. It tells you gives you hints or might give you some information about the knowledge within that body system that you might need to know about. How you apply the adaptations to the question, how you link to other topics. So we've got regular. Regular is basically a training program. Regular weight-bearing exercise. That's what type of exercise it is, and it's directing you towards the skeletal system, and she's obviously an endurance runner. So again, adaptations to the skeletal system covers this acronym for me when I teach it. This is just a translation of the question and answer information based on those prompts on the question. This was the mark scheme. This is fairly typical. Gives you your basic facts, often like this. So this would, if you just provided this, it would be a really low level 1 answer, facts. If you apply that knowledge to the question and explain it more, linking the information, then so if you incorporate these 2 bits, you're pushing level 2 or level 3 answers. But if you just give bare statements or facts, this is a level 1 topic. Again, what you can do is just pause the video, have a little read here. I've written a version of an answer. It's not necessarily the perfect answer by any means, but it's perhaps how you could structure your points to earn your marks. Make a clear point, break down the information, analyse means break down into small parts, and then put it back together to explain in a logical, sequential way, explaining your points. So just to finish, you should have a lot of information built up by the time you sit your exam. You've got your notes, your workbooks, your class notes, your access to teacher materials. There'll be hopefully learning videos like this and lots of other stuff. Big things to use are the exam question and mark scheme information. The more you get familiar with what the previous exam questions have been and what the mark schemes have wanted from you, the more prepared you're going to be. You have to practice in exam conditions, and obviously we'll build up to that through the unit. And also read the examiner's reports, because it gives feedback on where students nationally have got things right or the sorts of errors that have been made, and then you can obviously avoid making those.